This book is by Amartya Sen, Identity and Violence, The Illusion of Destiny.
Yes.
According to Nadine Gordimer, Nobel laureate in literature, he is a rare synthesis of great intellect and total personal human involvement combined in Amartya Sen, one of the few world intellectuals on whom we may rely to make sense out of our existential confusion. Between Nadine Gordimer wrote a beautiful book known as Burger's Daughter. Eh? We will read that also, little bit excerpts from Burger's Daughter. Now I will read you excerpt from his book in which he discusses the idea of multiculturalism as freedom. After the 2005 attacks on London, there were discussions of British policies on multiculturalism, which have a much wider reach and arouse much greater interest and passion than the boundaries of the ostensible subject matter would lead one to expect. 6 weeks after the terrorist attacks in London, in the summer of 2005, when Le Monde, the leading newspaper of France, presented a critique under the title The British Multicultural Model in Crisis, the debate was immediately joined by a leader of another liberal establishment, James A. Goldstone, director of the Open Society Justice Initiative in America, who described the Le Monde article as trumpeting and replied, "Don't use the very real threat of terrorism to justify shelving more than a quarter century of British achievement in the field of race relations. There is a general issue of some importance to be debated and evaluated here. I will argue that the real issue is not whether multiculturalism has gone too far, as Goldstone summarizes one of the lines of criticism, but what particular form multiculturalism should take. Is multiculturalism nothing other than the tolerance of diversity of cultures? Does it make a difference who chooses the cultural practices, whether they are imposed in the name of the culture of the community or whether they are freely chosen by persons with adequate opportunity to learn and reason about alternatives? What facilities do members of different communities have in schools as well as in the society at large to learn about the faiths and non-faiths of different people in the world and to understand how to reason about choices that human beings must, if only implicitly, make?" Usme then he tells about some examples in British society, When he first came as a student in 1953, his landlady was a little bit worried that Amartya Sen, that she was worried about the possibility of his skin color which might come off on the bath, and he had to assure her that his hue was agreeably sturdy and durable.
What hue? What is a hue?
Hue means his color.
Oh.
That was in 1953.
He was white?
No, but he is from Asian background. No?
Oh.
Amartya Sen is
What was she worried about?
That his color may wipe off on his bathtub.
His mother thought that.
His landlady.
Oh, his landlady thought that.
British landlady.
Oh.
But over a period of time, the joys of multicultural food, literature, music, dancing and the arts have come as a carnival. Now there is one gentleman who says that there is a cricket test, and this gives a marvelous clear-cut procedure for establishing his or her integration into British society. He says that cheer for the English cricket team and you will be fine. The immigrant's job is making sure he or she is really integrated into British society.
In a tone that suggests that you have a strong.
Otherwise, be quite exacting, if only because it is no longer easy to identify what the dominant lifestyle in Britain actually is. to which the immigrant must conform. Then there is another debate about food, that she is as English as daffodils or chicken tikka masala. Given all this, a South Asian immigrant to Britain might be a bit confused as to what is the British identity now. Huh? Same is true of Canadian society. You are from which background?
Indian.
Very good. Then he talks about plural monoculturalism. If a young girl in a conservative immigrant family wants to go out on a date with an English boy, that would certainly be a multicultural initiative. In contrast, the attempt by her guardians to stop her from doing this, a common enough occurrence, is hardly a multicultural move, since it seeks to keep the cultures sequestered. And yet, it is the parents' prohibition which contributes to plural monoculturalism that seems to get most of the vocal and loud defense for the alleged multiculturalists, on the ground of the importance of honoring traditional cultures, as if the cultural freedom of the young woman were of no relevance whatsoever, and if the distinct cultures must somehow remain in secluded boxes. Then in this chapter he goes on to tell about a very interesting lady,
Yes.
Cornelia Sorabji.
You have read this before.
Bete, several times. I'm trying to understand it, Bete. I have read it before, but I'm trying to understand. So I read it. Remember, I read this at Rattray.
You can read this again and again.
Bete, I read it in 2009
Yes.
when I bought it. I read it in Tripoli. Huh? You see? I read it at Manori.
Nobel
This is your
Prize.
photograph with your Nanaji. Then I read it at Rattray a little bit with you. Remember? Now I'm sitting in Frank Schofield Garden and reading it.
Yes.
Frank Schofield Memorial Park in Toronto Zoo. Yeah? So, he talked about one very, very
Talked about.
amazing lady.
Our teacher always says that you should say right, not talk.
Okay, he writes about one amazing lady, Cornelia Sorabji, who came to Britain from India in the 1880s, and her identities reflect the varieties of affiliations she, like others, had. She was variously described by herself and others as an Indian. She did eventually return to India and wrote an engaging book called India Calling, as being at home in England as well, homed in two countries, England and India. As a Parsi, I am Parsi by nationality.
But
As a Christian, full of admiration for the early martyrs of the Christian church. As a sari-clad woman, always perfectly dressed in a richly colored silk sari. As the Manchester Guardian described her. As a lawyer and barrister of law at Lincoln's Inn. As a fighter for women's education and for legal rights, particularly for secluded women. As a committed supporter of the British Raj, who even accused Mahatma Gandhi, not particularly fairly, for enrolling babies as early as 6 or 7 years of age. Always nostalgic about India, the green paraquets of Bodh Gaya, the blue wood smoke in an Indian village.
yes.
As a firm believer in the asymmetry between men and women, she was proud to be seen as a modern woman. As a teacher at an exclusively men's college at 18 in a male college, and as the first woman ever of any background to get a degree of Bachelor of Civil Law at Oxford, requiring a special decree from congregation to allow her to sit.
Yes, degrees from such great.
So, Bete, he has written so amazingly about this great lady, and her choices must have been influenced by her social origin and background.
She was Indian? Or
Indian origin.
Oh,
Education is not about getting children, even very young ones, immersed in old inherited ethos. It is also about helping children to develop the ability to reason about new decisions any grown-up person will have to take. The important goal is not some formulaic parity in relations to old Brits with their old faith schools, but what would best enhance the capability of the children to live examined lives as they grow up in an integrated country. But Plato ने बोला था that a life unexamined is a life not worth living. So he's saying you lead examined lives. ये क्या बना रहे?
this is Frank Sophie.
Wow, यार. Frank Schofield. Who was Frank Schofield, bete?
Because it's black and white and he associated.
Who was Frank Schofield?
He was, I don't know.
This is a park, Confucian Park. He was a veterinary doctor who had trained at the University of Guelph, and then he went back to Korea. And this park is a sister park. Toronto Zoo is the sister zoo of Seoul Zoo. Eh? So this is part of multicultural. So this is our video journal and reading discussion journal of 6th of July 2016, Wednesday.